Hello! Alright, we're going to talk about the Ignite Eviscerate Elementalist build. I went over this pretty quickly in a smaller video, and some people asked me to go deeper into it, so I'm going to do a pretty deep... Not the deepest dive into this. I'm going to keep it beginner-friendly as much as I can, so I'm not going to get super deep into the weeds of damage calculations and whatever. Going over the Ignite damage calculations would be an entire video unto itself. So, if you are... you don't consider yourself to be super, like, deep in the weeds on numbers and stuff in Path of Exile. You're just like, you just want to build that works, gets to endgame, is affordable, can do stuff, and will allow you to basically learn how to do some endgame stuff a lot more. This is the build for you. So I'll explain every single thing in detail as much as I can, and I'll try to make it make sense. First up, what is Eviscerate? Eviscerate is a retail attack skill. It requires a sword and shield, fires 2 shots in a V shape, and it can point-blank people, meaning that if an enemy is in point-blank range to you, they can get hit by both waves at the same time. It cannot be evaded by enemies. It always inflicts a bleed, and it has absolutely ridiculous base and added damage. Base damage refers to the damage scaling off of your weapon. Added is the added damage. Both of those are obscenely high. So if you were to point-blank somebody, you would basically be doubling your damage. The intended use for this, if you know any a little bit about the passive tree and the classes and things, you may be thinking, oh, well, this sounds perfect for Gladiator, because Duelist is on the bottom of the passive tree. It's got bleed and retail stuff, and bleed and retail nodes are all down there. And that's certainly the intention. It's very obviously GGG's intention with this is to make it a bleed retail Gladiator build. But this is also Path of Exile, and if you're doing what GGG intends, I mean, you can. It'll work, but that's boring. Come on. We're going to do this with Ignite. So, what is Ignite? Ignite is an elemental damage over time ailment. It is based on the fire damage that inflicted the Ignite, and it is inflicted by hits that do fire damage. So if you have a hit that doesn't do any fire damage, it cannot inflict an Ignite. If you have a hit that does some fire damage, then it can. Crits always inflict Ignite. And the Ignite scales off of the damage of the fire damage of that hit. By default, it's like 90%. And it ignites for 4 seconds. So, in other words, you're doing 360%. I can math. 360% damage of that hit over 4 seconds. An enemy can only have... They can technically have multiple Ignites. Again, I'm not going to get super deep into it, but only the strongest Ignite will actually affect an enemy. So if you apply a stronger one, it'll override. If you apply a weaker one, it won't. The most important thing here is what Ignite scales off of. Because it scales off of a lot of things. It scales off of damage, it scales off damage over time, it scales off fire damage, burning damage, elemental damage, ailment effect, all those kind of things. It has a ton of scaling vectors, which means that it's not just doing 360% of the fire damage of the hit, it could be doing a lot more than that. So why are we doing this on Elementalist? Easy answer, Shaper of Flames, Shaper of Storms, and where you are on the tree. Gives you access to damage scaling, plus golems, which in Mercenary League were made a lot better. And if you're watching this in the future, hopefully they've stayed the same. The thing about this build is that it probably will stay good in the future, because the Elementalist hasn't been touched in a long time, which probably is a good thing, because it doesn't need to be. And golems are great. Okay, so Shaper of Flames has 2 things on there. All hits ignite, all damage ignites. So all hits ignite means that your ignite chance is irrelevant. Usually it's a crit that ignites, or it's based on your chance. The Shaper of Flames means that you will always ignite regardless. All damage ignites means that the damage type is irrelevant. It says all damage ignites. That means all physical, cold, lightning, chaos, and fire damage. All of it will ignite, and that's going to be important later. It means that your ignites can scale a lot harder because it scales off of your entire damage pool. Shaper of Storms is basically the same thing, but it's for shock. Shock usually is a lightning ailment, but instead, all of your hits will shock, and all of your damage will shock. Shock basically is an ailment that doesn't damage an enemy, but it increases the amount of damage they take. I'm not going to get super deep into it because it's not, again, it's not super important here. All of it is that it's a way to deal more damage to an enemy. Alright, so how does the damage scaling work on this build? Well, Witch has access to all of the damage types that scale Ignite just because of where you spawn on the tree. Sure, you got a path all the way around to get to the retail nodes and the block nodes, but you've got all of your Ignite, all your fire damage, like damage over time, all that's up in the Witch area. And even though Eviscerate is supposed to inflict bleed, and it is, you don't care that it's inflicting a bleed. What you care about is the Ignite that you're inflicting. The fact that it inflicts bleed doesn't even matter to you. You're not scaling it, you're not caring, you just make it 0. Actually, I think it is 0 because you're not doing Fizz damage. We'll get into that later. The other Ascendancy passive that's notable here is Liege of the Primordial. Golems are very powerful buffs. They were made more powerful this league, and they're made even more powerful with Liege of the Primordial. Golems are a passive buff. You just summon it, and then it's a little minion that follows you around, and it gives you passively some kind of buff based on the golem type until it dies, and then you can just resummon it. When you get access to golems, and I think it's Act 4, you should absolutely, if you have the socket for it, put a golem on, because every single build will benefit from a golem in some way. You probably won't hold on to it forever, unless you're an Elementalist or something like that, but it's great, and if you ever have a build that has an open slot, just throw a golem on there. If anything else, maybe it dies quickly, but you've got a little buff for a little while, and you can just resummon it. Liege of the Primordial makes golems way more durable, because it makes them immune to elemental damage. So only physical damage affects them. It also makes your golems resummon automatically, so now your golems are very strong, they're very durable. And if they die, well, you got 4 seconds of downtime until they just resummon themselves. In theory, this sounded, when this change was made, that it was going to be, like, nice but not great. In practice, this is incredible. The golems are already super durable, and now if they go down, they just come back, you barely even notice it. This also gives you 1 extra golem, which is what you want. So, which golems do you take? On this passive tree, we've got 4 golems. You only need 2. You can take 4. There's room for this build to be improved, but we're going to go with 4. The 2 that you absolutely must take, Chaos Golem, that buffs your damage over time, and Flame Golem, which buffs your damage outright. POB says that Lightning Golem will help, but that's misleading because attack speed doesn't actually benefit this build. If you throw this into Path of Building, it's going to take your attack speed into account. If you actually look at the raw numbers on the Ignite, it is giving you accurate information. Like, you are dot capped on this, but attack speed is not actually beneficial to you because your Eviscerate only triggers when you block, and it's on a cooldown, so attack speed isn't going to matter there. So I don't know why it does that. Don't ask me why. I don't know how POP works. Okay. So, your 6th link, let's go over your Eviscerate. It's technically, actually, a 7 link. Because it's going to be in a chess piece called the Covenant. The Covenant adds level 29 added chaos damage. So it's like you have your Eviscerate linked to 6 other gems. You want to have Unbound Ailments, Deadly Ailments, Swift Affliction, Volatility, and Burning damage. All of that will increase your damage a ton. Start with the base versions. Upgrade to the Awakened versions when you can. So those are going to give you a tremendous amount of extra damage. Make sure that you're far over dot cap. But how do you get these 6 links? Because these are not easy colors to get. If you're not familiar, the colors that show up on sockets are based on the item's attribute affinity. So if a gear piece has only energy shield, it means that it is, we call that an int base. I call it a blue base. If it's got dexterity only, then it's a green base. If it's got dexterity and energy shield, then it's a green-blue. It's dex int. And when you chrome an item, it will randomly reroll the sockets, but it will bias it towards the colors that the item is. So Covenant is a blue item, meaning that it's going to bias towards getting a lot of blue sockets, and you want green and red sockets on it, which would be fine if you only needed 1 or 2, but you need a lot more than that. So how do you go about getting that? Tainted chromatic orbs are a complete random. It doesn't respect color at all. So, but it can only be used on corrupted items, which is fine. You can get a Covenant. The easy way to do this would be to get the Covenant, corrupt it, or maybe buy one that already has a good corruption, and hope it doesn't break. As in, if it downgrades to a rare, then you're screwed. But if it stays rare and it gives you a good corrupted implicit, we'll talk about this later, then you can use tainted currency. So the ideal process here would be get the Covenant that's already pre-corrupted and has a good number of sockets. If not, get one that's uncorrupted, and then take it to the crafting bench and put 6 sockets on it. It costs 350 jeweler orbs. It's not that much. And then give it 5 links, which is, I think, 150 fusings. Then corrupt it. Hope for a good implicit. Hope it doesn't break anything. And then use Tainted Orb of Fusing, which will unpredictably add or remove a link. Hope that it adds. Now you've got 6 links, and then you just Tainted Chromatic Orb until you get the right color combination. And there you go. So that's your 6th link there. Other key skills. You're going to need Malevolence, because that increases your damage over time. That's your aura. Tempest Shield gives you spell block, and it makes you immune to shock. Very, very good. Steel Skin, linked to automation. This is good defensively. There are a lot of good defensive skills. I choose Steel Skin because it makes you bleed immune. Every time it activates, it clears all your bleeds. Perfect. Vol Smite, I wanted a skill that could just be used without having to retaliate, and so I went with Smite. And I figured, why not use Vol Smite? It is unbelievably good trash clear. It's not very strong at all, but if you run into a pack of white mobs, and you're probably seeing this if you're watching what's in the background, like open up a strong box, hit Vol Smite, and then boom, everything's dead. It's great. It's not going to work against bosses at all. It barely works against rares. But against trash, which is the majority of what you're going to be fighting, it's absolutely perfect. It's a wonderful skill. You also want Arcanist Brand with Flame Surge and Flammability. Arcanist Brand, you cast it down, and it links to a nearby enemy, and then repeatedly casts whatever skills are linked to it. In this case, Flame Surge and Flammability. It does cost mana to do that, by the way. That's not exactly made clear, but it does cost mana to cast those skills. It's not important on this build, but it is important if you use Arcanist Brand ever, and you're like, why am I out of mana? That's why. Flammability curses the enemy, lowering their fire resistance, which makes you deal more damage with your Ignite. And Flame Surge, every time it hits, it causes the enemy to drop Burning Ground on the ground. That is 25% of the strength of the Ignite that they're hit with. So against trash mobs, you're not going to be using Arcanist Brand, but against bosses, rare mobs, things like that, you're going to be using Arcanist Brand for the Flammability effect, and then it's going to drop the Burning Ground, which just increases the damage against them. And if they have any little minions or little ads following them around, they're just going to get toasted by the Burning Ground. It's great. For movement, I like to have 2 movement skills. I like to have a Blink to get over gaps and things. Blinks are immensely important. And then Shield Charge, because you have a shield, so you may as well use Shield Charge. So your Blink can be Flame Dash or Frost Blink. Both of them are fine. I prefer Flame Dash. I have the MTXs for Flame Dash, which is kind of the reason that I prefer it more. Frost Blink is also a perfectly fine option. It's whatever you want. Flame Dash also does fire damage. I mean, you're not going to be damaging with Flame Dash, but, you know, it's the thing. Finally, Sigil of Power. This is mostly defensive. As you cast mana inside the Sigil, it gets stronger and it causes enemies to deal less damage. I don't like that it forces you to, like, stand still in an area. I don't like that it has to charge up. I'm not a huge fan of the skill, but it's there if you need it, and it's pretty decent against boss fights. I have noticed it be slightly useful if you have something else that you think would be more useful. You know, speak up. Alright, let's talk about the key uniques that you use on this build. For your weapon, Story of the Vol. So this improves your shocks and your ignites, and it causes you to freeze. In the absence of Shaper of Storms and Shaper of Flames, this would also be making all of your damage ignite and shock, and it also freezes. And increases all the strength on that. Some other builds will use different uniques. Some builds use Energy Blade on this. This is just one variant. I haven't seen a lot of people do this particular variant. In fact, I found this build on PoE Ninja, And then, like, the next day after I imported the build, the guy changed to something else, and now he deleted his character. So, yeah, this is not a very common build. Most people are using Ephemeral Edge or Energy Blade, which are also both great, but my brain isn't big enough for Energy Blade, and Ephemeral Edge is too common. Do something interesting. For your chess piece, you want the Covenant. The added chaos damage is huge. In fact, I would dare say it's your primary source of damage. Next, you want to have the Taming. If things survive after your Eviscerate, this just seals their fate. Absolutely. Dyadian Dawn, this is like the Ignite belt. There is an argument to be made for endgame switching to Mageblood. It's a debate I've seen in a couple of comment sections regarding Ignite builds. Do you switch to Mageblood? That is an open question, and if you switch to Mageblood on this build, you will lose a lot of damage, but it's possible, because there's a lot of room for improvement on this build, it's possible that you can make that damage up elsewhere. But as it is, Dyadian Dawn makes you deal no physical damage, and it makes your Ignites faster, meaning that you do more damage quicker. It's the same amount of damage, it's just quicker. And no physical damage also has the added benefit of meaning that you can ignore the enemy's reflect physical damage modifier when you roll maps. So if you can find a way to make Mageblood work, great. If not, stick with the Dyadian Dawn. Atsui's Promise, the Amethyst Flask. This is just lots of extra damage. Now the great thing, the thing that I love the most about all of these uniques, is that none of them are very expensive. And they weren't expensive this league. In fact, I got all of these, I think the most, I want to say 40 or 60 chaos. Even if, like, let's say this build takes off and it becomes super meta, or people find ways to use these items and these go super up in demand, will this build's cost go up? Not really. For the reason that these are not super chase uniques. They're not super rare. Atsui's Promise drops from the Sacrifice Fragments version of Atsuri, so it's pretty common. It's only a couple chaos in like every league. Dyadian Dawn is not a very expensive belt. In fact, in leagues where like Explosive Arrow has been super meta, and this is a great Explosive Arrow belt, it's not very expensive because it's common enough. The Taming is made by combining all three Barrack rings: Barrack's Respite, Barrack's Pass, and Barrack's Grip. And you've probably seen those drop all the time. They even drop in the campaign. They're very common rings. Even though Barrack's Respite is a very in-demand ring, they're still not that expensive. So you can just, accumulate 2 of them, buy the one you don't need, or find all 3 of them if you get lucky, and then make the Taming yourself. Or you just buy the Taming for a few chaos. It's not that expensive. The Covenant can get a little expensive. It's a drop anywhere unique, but it's not that hard to come by. Story of the Vol is the only one here that is special. It drops from Alva Temples, from a specific room. People don't run Alva Temples a lot, so it can get a little rare. If there ever comes out that there's a build that really wants this, the price probably would go up. It might hit a Divine or 2. But I see it in the same league as, same vein as, like, the Fulcrum. Anybody who played back during Affliction League will remember when the Fulcrum Chieftain build was super meta, and the Fulcrum was, like, 2 or 3 Divines. Similarly to Story of the Vault, it comes from one specific location, Heist. But as that build fell off, the Fulcrum is now a super cheap unique to get. Story of the Vol, I suspect, would be the same thing. If it ever gets meta, it will go up in price, but it's not going to be that expensive because it's not like it's super rare. You can more or less target farm it. Other key items you want to get. Your Prismatic Tincture, this is very important. This is basically all of your dot damage. You want to roll it to get increased effect and dot multi. Your increased effect will increase the mana burn. That is totally fine, because you're going to activate it, cast your Eviscerate, and then deactivate it. Or leave it active until your mana burns, who cares? Like, you're going to cast 1 Eviscerate. This increases your damage over time by an obscene amount. Open up the POB, uncheck the Prismatic Tincture, and see what it does to your damage over time. If you're ever fighting a boss and you're like, why am I not damaging it? I guarantee it's because you forgot to turn on your Prismatic Tincture. Trust me, I do it all the time. Your helmets. The implicits you want on that, you want Eldritch Implicits for increased flammability effect and increased effect of non-damaging elements. That increases your shock effect. And you want it rolled with plus level of minion gems. +2 is ideal. +1 is fine. We'll talk about how to craft this a little bit later. For gloves, you need the Eldritch Implicits for exposure. One of the most important things. Exposure causes an enemy to take more damage of that type, in this case fire damage. And Ignite Spread, because Eviscerate's coverage is terrible. The waves can be improved, like you can increase the width on those, but the scaling on it is awful. You can scale your area of effect hugely and it won't increase that much. So you need Ignite Proliferate. Worth noting, because I mentioned the Fulcrum build a few minutes ago, if you're familiar with Ignite Proliferation, this is how it works. When an Ignite is inflicted, it tries to find any enemy within the radius specified, and then it inflicts that Ignite onto them, and it does chain, but it only chains on the moment the Ignite is inflicted. If you're familiar with the Fulcrum build, you're familiar with like the walking supernova effect, this is not that. It's a different kind of Ignite Proliferation. So if you eviscerate into a group of enemies, even if you're only eviscerating like a tiny number of them, you're going to ignite all of the ones that you've touched, which will then chain like a virus around until it runs out of enemies. And everything's going to be ignited and will probably just die. Very important. You can get this on a cluster jewel. It's totally fine to do that, but I think there are better passives you can get on clusters. So I think that this is the best spot for this, and I also don't think that there's better options on your gloves, so I feel like this is what you would want to get. On your boots, you just want faster Ignite. And then movement speed, obviously. You know, craft your boots however you want to craft your boots, it's fine. And then on your amulet, you want increased effect of non-damaging elements, and you want to anoint Ash, Frost, and Storm. Huge damage increase. So, like, other than that, what specifically do you roll on all your items? What do you roll on the other ring that isn't the taming? What do you roll on shield? Answers whatever you want. Whatever you think would be beneficial to you. I listed my gear in the POB if you want to follow that. All of my gear, with the exception of the helmet, were just randomly crafted. Like, I just kind of went for it and got some good stuff. I didn't invest a ton of money into it. It was under 2 divines to buy all of the gear, and then after I rolled and crafted, I think it may have been like maybe another divine, maybe 2 worth of stuff. And I'm overestimating here because I don't want to give you an unrealistic expectation of like, I can do this on exactly 2 divines. I want to give you a realistic expectation and tell you that if you've got 5 divines, I 100% guarantee, but I probably shouldn't say that, but I almost guarantee that you can do this build. It's great. The shield, if you shaper influence it, can roll some stuff that is very useful for like spell suppression. So you could do that if you want. The shaper exalts are not super expensive, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You know, you can invest as much or as little money into these as you want. I should also say, if you don't want to go for the helmet craft right away, and I definitely don't recommend you do, there are some unique helmets that will work here. On the high end, Replica Heat Shiver is very good. That would work a lot. The helmet that I used when I started, because I got this from a guy on PoE Ninja, he was using the helmet Vol's Vision, which is like fine, but it has it benefits you if you don't have any corrupted items, and you're absolutely going to have corrupted items, at the very least the Covenant. So I don't know why he was using Vol's Vision. I don't know why I didn't clock that either, but hey, I mean, it goes to show you that you don't need to fully understand this build to play it and to do well with it. So you can use Vol's Vision. It's like a 2 or 3 Chaos helmet. Replica Heat Shiver is a bit more expensive. And then there's a few others. You can go into POB and sort by helmets, the little uniques section. Sort by helmets, and then just kind of just set it to helmets, sort by DPS added, and then just kind of look at what's there. You know, or do whatever you want. You know, again, it's not super important. What is important here is that you cap your resistances. You absolutely have to cap your resistances. I mean, you should always cap them, but you absolutely need to cap them here. And attempt to cap all of them. I mean the chaos as well. If you can do that, it will work brilliantly. Alright, let's talk about additional items to use on here. Flasks. You want a life, a quicksilver, and a sulfur flask. Sulfur does a little bit of extra damage. Quicksilver, because you should always have a Quicksilver flask. I mean, come on. And Life Flask. Roll your Life Flask with Ignite immunity. Oftentimes people will recommend you roll it with Corrupted Blood immunity. But Steel Skin removes your bleeding, Corrupted blood is usually avoidable, and when it's inflicted, it's usually weak enough that you can tank through it with your life flask and with other sources of health regen. If you are very concerned, you can take corrupted blood immunity on the passive trait. For your jewels, you want to roll jewels that have added damage with swords, that have damage over time, that have life. In order, I think those are the most important modifiers you can have. As for clusters, you want to go for medium burning damage cluster jewels. What passives do you want on those clusters? And if you don't know a lot about cluster jewels, in general, you want to go for the cluster jewels that have the fewest number of added passive skills. And what you're really looking for on the clusters is not the small nodes, you're looking for the notables on there. You want to have the smallest number of nodes so that you can get to those notables as fast as possible. So you want to have your medium burning clusters. You want to have them as few passives as possible. And then what do you want to look for? There's actually a lot. There are some cluster builds, some cluster jewels that you want for some builds that require you to roll a whole lot, and it's 2, 4, 5 divines to get a good cluster. This is not that case. There are so many nodes that work well for this that you can really just chaos it until you get like 2 of them, and then you're good to go. Blowback, exposure therapy, circling oblivion, cremator, master of fire. Master of fire is the node I mentioned earlier. It will do the exposure thing, so it can replace your glove implicit. I don't think it's super necessary, but you can roll it. Blowback is faster damage. Exposure therapy is defensive. Circling oblivion, I think circling oblivion is the best in my opinion. Cremator is corpse destruction, so if you're scared of detonate dead monsters, use that. I don't think you should be, for a couple of reasons that we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, before we move on, I want to talk about things that are specific to Mercenary League, in case you're watching this during Mercenary League, or in case the Mercenaries go core. Personal hot take, I think it will. What do you want your Mercenary to have? So you want to have a infamous kineticist. I don't know a ton about Mercenaries. I haven't gone super deep in it, but I have looked into what uniques would benefit this build really well. For the helmet, Leer Cast. It just increases your damage. It's one of the best. Replica Ambu's Charge for the chest piece. So you already have a way to generate endurance charges, but this more or less ensures that you always have endurance charges, so it's good for durability. Zoph's Heart for the amulet. That causes enemies to be covered in ash. Covered in ash is a tremendous damage multiplier for you, so it's absolutely amazing. Definitely grab it. For the rings, Dodra's Damning, and for the ring and glove, Dodra's Damning, Asenath's Gentle Touch. Asenath's Gentle Touch is a glove that curses enemies on hit with temporal chains, and it also causes corpses to be destroyed. That temp chains will override your flammability. But Dodra's Damning increases the curse limit, which means that your flammability will not be overridden. So don't use Asenath's unless you're also using Dodra's Damning. If you're using a different pair of gloves, you can swap out Dodra's Damning for something else. Victario's Charity for the shield, because you don't have frenzy charges. This ensures that you have them. This also has the potential to give you other charges, but frenzy is the only one that it will reliably give you. Because your kineticist is not going to be killing things. You're going to be killing things. The optionals. You can replace these with whatever you feel like replacing them with. Eclipse Solaris for the wand. That blinds nearby enemies, and blind is a good defensive modifier. Time Clasp for the other ring. That is defensive. That's a defensive layer for your merc. And I absolutely love Blight. I got the Stampede boots out of one of the first Blights I did, and I thought, hey, that's great. Let me throw that on the merc, and you get a free anoint for your mercenary. Hooray. Quick side note here. If you give them more max endurance charges, the way that charge sharing works off of your personal charge cap, not the mercenaries. So like if the mercenaries charge cap was like 10 endurance charges and your cap was 3, you don't get their 10, you just get a new one to replace your oldest charge. So don't feel like you can anoint this with extra endurance charges and that means, oh, I get more endurance charges. No, that just means they get more endurance charges. It's the same way Conduit works. Alright, Let's talk about some of the pitfalls of this build. I like talking about the negatives before I like talking about the positives because I want to set your expectations realistically. Being ignited hurts. And I mean that for the enemies, and I mean that for you. You need ignite immunity on your life flask. Because poison's a problem if you let it build up. But poison is something that's pretty avoidable. It's pretty well communicated. And it's really something that punishes you if you're just like playing poorly. It's very easy to avoid poison unless you're in a situation where you're doing like the Rizlatha map. I forget what map that's called, where there's just poison everywhere in that boss fight. That obviously sucks, so just don't do that one. But being ignited, however, ignites are very fast and very strong. If you're playing this build, you understand what it's like to ignite people. Imagine that on you. Ground dots will destroy you on this build. That means burning ground, it means shocked ground, and if you're doing T16.5s or T17s, it means atomizer storms, or whatever they're called. The Cirrus deatomization things, the little things that Cirrus puts on the ground, those things will absolutely destroy you. Because this is a block build. Block works against hits, block does not work against damage over time. So the ignite immunity on your flask will stop ignites from killing you. You have a lot of chaos dot resistance and chaos resistance, so you're good against poison. And then against bleeding, you can grab that passive for corrupted blood, and steel skin will kill your bleeding. So other than that, the pitfalls are the same as any other retaliation build. It's spooky to have to take a hit in order to deal a hit. It's not as spooky as you think it is, but you know, if you don't like retal builds, this is not the build for you. Let's talk about the benefits, though. Reason I like this build. The thing that really sealed this for me as like one of my favorite builds and favorite build archetypes is Bismuth Tornadoes. So when you activate a Bismuth deposit, it empowers enemies in the map, and it makes these stupid tornadoes all over the place, and those tornadoes suck. But what is not very intuitive is that those tornadoes aren't a damage over time. They're actually a very rapid series of hits, which means with your 3/4 chance to block, you're just blocking constantly. You're just going to hear that bam, 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 bam. You're going to hear the constant retaliation cues, and that's immensely beneficial for you. If there's a Bismuth Tornado in a boss fight, you just permanently have the ability to eviscerate things off cooldown. It's absolutely amazing. You can also block a lot more than you probably realize, and you will discover these as you accidentally block them. Some of the things that I have discovered on accident that you can block: Shaper Slams, Exarch Balls, Die Beams from Cirrus and Eater, the Unbreakable, Fortress Map, Tier 17, the Unbreakable. When he does that move where he spins around and he does the big laser beam, and then he turns around and he starts doing the electrifying things, like, you probably have experienced how just destructive that ability is. You can block all of it. Literally all of it. I was absolutely dumbfounded when that accidentally happened. Also, Uber Shaper is the only Uber boss that I've ever killed. I'm not a super endgame player. Don't sue me. I fought Uber Shaper and the ball phase, where he makes all the little purple balls go around, and those things do like a bazillion damages, kill you. You can block those. Perfect. You can't block the Shaper's beam, though. So just be careful with that. That is a damage over time. You can't block that. But you can block his slams, and you can block the balls. And you can't block the things on the ground, obviously, because like I said, they're dots. Alright, so how do you get to this point? I would say, like I said in the other one, start with a good witch leveling build. Just do Zizzarin's Wave of Conviction build. And you can do any witch build, obviously. I like the Wave of Conviction build. It was super comfortable. It wasn't fast, but it was comfy. I never felt like I was in danger. And it was fire damage. It was ignite based, so it was kind of like a nice little segue. But any build's fine. Get a couple of divines. I'd say get at least 2. 4 is probably good. 5, I would say you're absolutely golden. The uniques are very, very cheap. Starter crafting can get expensive if you're unlucky. I wasn't the luckiest, so I think is why I spent around, I want to say, 4 divines. And then for starter helmets, like I mentioned earlier, Vol's Vision is what I used. But if you could get any blue helmet, any energy shield base with minion gem level that has some decent affixes on it, that will work as well. Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, things like Replica Heat Shiver, or just, look around for some uniques that might be nice. Alright, let's talk about rolling maps. If you roll a map that has chance to avoid ailments, roll over that, because that will basically kill your build. If enemies have like a 70% chance to avoid ailments, you will eviscerate them, and you're not constantly eviscerating, so you're not constantly igniting. You're going to eviscerate them, and they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. And so yeah, kills your build. Don't do it. Players have reduced block chance. Obviously, you're playing a block build. That will destroy your build, so don't do it. Reflect Ellie. You can deal with Reflect Fizz. Reflect Ellie, you cannot. The way to usually deal with Reflect Ellie if you're dealing Ellie damage is to grab the Soul of Yugal Pantheon and then grab a node on the tree that says you ignore, I forget what the percentage is, but it means you ignore all reflected Ellie damage. You don't have access to that node, so you could take the Yugal Reflect immunity, but I wouldn't trust that to keep you alive, so just roll over Reflect Ellie. You probably are doing it anyway, so it's probably not a big deal. Reduced max res is usually a build killer. Up to you if you want to remove that. I never remove that. Awakener's Desolation, I mentioned this in the Pitfalls section. This is the most debilitating damage over time effect on the ground that I've seen. It sucks. It's way more common than you think it is. It's so hard to avoid. I absolutely despise it. And then Volatile Cores. I had heard a lot about people saying that they hate Volatile Cores, that they always roll over it. I didn't understand why until I actually started making this video. And I was going to do a build showcase on a Fortress map. And I was like, oh, Volatile Cores, whatever, I don't care. Things explode and I block it. Yeah, no. It's like going into, like, an Exarch fight and just being like, I'm going to tank the Meteor Ball phase. And then being like, why did I die? Because you blocked 3/4 of the meteors and then the other 25% destroyed you. Don't do Volatile Cores. Alright, helmet crafting. This is the most uncertain part of this. I have a full write-up in the POB, because I'm going to talk about this pretty quickly. The POB should give you more information. If you still have questions, ask me in the comments. And hopefully, if someone out there knows a better way to do this, please speak up. Please post a comment, like I'll pin it, whatever. Because I figured this out on my own, and I really hope that this is not the optimal way to do it, because I got really unlucky and blew about 12 Divines on this helmet. And I know that in the grand scheme of things, crafting endgame helmets 12 Divines is nothing, but it felt really bad for me. Here's the process that I did. Start with a Divine Crown and have a good fract suffix on it. I found one that had Magic Find. I thought that was a fun meme, so I got Magic Find. Then alt spam it until you get minion gem level. Allegedly, it should take a couple thousand alts to get +2, but a few hundred to get +1 level. So alt until you get what you want. I stopped at 1 because I had already spent like 500 alts and I didn't want to click anymore. So now you've got fract suffix and the minion gem level. You then regal it, and you want to hope for either a good prefix or any suffix. If you fail to get either one of those, scour it and start over. Once you've done that, you then lock prefixes at your crafting bench, and then you go to your harvest bench and you reforge chaos. This guarantees chaos res, so you want to hope for a high tier chaos res. However, there's a lot of things here that can cause problems. If you have a bad chaos res, and you also have bad prefixes, scour and start over. Because this can also add more than just chaos res. It could add additional suffixes, it could add prefixes. If you get bad chaos res, and the prefixes are acceptable, or unaffected, cool, you can lock prefixes again, just repeat the process. If you got bad chaos res, and it filled all of your suffixes, apply an Eldritch Ichor. You should not have Eldritch crafted on this yet. Apply an Eldritch Ichor, then use an Eldritch Orb of Annulment. That will force one of the suffixes to be annulled off, which will allow you to then repeat the process. You then lock prefixes, harvest, reforge, chaos. Once you get a good tier of chaos res, you then need to hope you've also got some good prefixes and probably some good suffixes. There's nothing on this that you can roll that will brick the build, but there are plenty of things that can roll on the helmet that will be just kind of sucky. So it's up to you how exactly you want to approach this. Like if you get like tier 1 maxed out chaos res and then like tier 12 like energy shield, like something terrible. Like I got really bad energy shield armor. Then, it's up to you. Do you want to risk losing that T1 Chaos Res? How you finish it is ultimately up to you once you get that Chaos Res. What I did was I crafted on Fire Res for my third suffix, and then I exalted on the open prefix. What I ended up with was good magic find and minion gem level on the prefixes, as well as a very bad energy shield roll, which sucked, but it is what it is. On the suffixes, I had the fracked magic find, I now have the crafted Fire Res, and I have the decent Chaos Res. I had spent like 12 divines, so I figured I will stop there. I'll call it good, call it a day. It'll be totally fine and it works. And then you can, Eldritch Craft on it however you want. Alright, so now you've got the build, you've got it set up, what do you do now? Do maps. I mean, do whatever maps you want. Uber viability, unknown. I don't like doing Uber bosses because that's a lot of money to spend on the fragments to do something that I'm not even confident I can do. That's just me. I'm more of a cautious player. If you try it, let me know how it goes. Like, please, let everybody know. Post in the comments, yeah, I did it, and Uber Exarch was, like, super comfy or something like that. Then great, awesome. I don't do it. The only one I did was Uber Shaper. It was tough, but I also don't really do Ubers, so, maybe that's just on me. Bossing is pretty good. Sometimes they can get spooky. You have to take hits to retaliate, and there's no guarantee that you're going to actually block the hit. But, you do block more than you think. So, maybe fighting, like, Al-Hazmin, the Hunter, like, that's going to be spooky because there's, like, Chaos Dot everywhere. But if you're fighting, like, Veritania, totally fine. If you're just fighting, like, map bosses in general, totally fine. What kind of league mechanics do you do? Anything where dot isn't a concern, which is most things, actually. I can't really think of any specific league mechanics that, like, this is designed for, or any specific league mechanics that it's really bad with. I'm not a fan of Expedition, but maybe that works fine. I've done Harvest alongside a friend. It did pretty well there. My chosen strat right now is Betrayal and Strongboxes. As you've seen in this footage running in the background. Large groups of trash monsters that you can just instantly wipe out, and when the Betrayal guys show up, they're not actually that scary because you can block most of them, and then they die really quickly. So that's pretty great. But yeah, do whatever you want. The only thing I'll say is Legion is very difficult. Because obviously when they're in the time prison, they aren't hitting you, so you can't retaliate against them. If you have a way to deal with that, maybe you're coupling Legion with, like, Breach or something to get those procs off. I don't know. Yeah, so do whatever you want. If you try this build and you like it, and you find a strat that works, please post in the comments. All right, final thoughts. I hope that you guys find this build interesting. If you try it, let me know. If you find improvements, let me know. Maybe I'll make an update to this later. Because I'm already, as I was putting this together, I was looking at the passive tree, and I'm like, there's so much stuff in here that I could tweak. There are little changes here and there, but I'm dot capped, and I feel like I'm survivable enough. I'm not willing to put in that brain effort. If someone wants to make some suggestions, I'll definitely give them a try. Yeah. I hope you guys have a great experience. If you're playing the new Po2 League, I hope you're having fun. And if you're watching this in the future, I hope that you've been having a great time. I hope this build survives. I think this build will. There's not much in this build that I can see GGD tweaking too much to make it not work. I'll make an update next league, just confirming whether or not it still works. And yeah, have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Vow the sanctuary. To the death! Ah, the bargainer. Let steel taste blood one. Bring your Inquisition, Exile. I guarantee death holds no deal this time. I underestimate your resolve, Exile.